we have our assembly, we have our editor's cut, we have our director's cut, maybe there's a producer's cut. There's all these different types of cuts that we always hear about. What is the first one that we do?
Yeah.
In my world, it's always an assembly. But,
yeah, and as we touched on that earlier, yes, the editor's assembly is the chance that your editor will take by assembling your circled takes and plopping them in the timeline. It can be as rudimentary as just dropping those cuts in one after another, but it's also the opportunity for your editor to actually put their creative input on the show. It's a very creative position. You should keep in mind as the filmmaker that your editor will want to put some of their creative ideas into the assembly. Just make sure they're not going a little too far, because that could create some problems where you end up with the movie that you didn't even decide in the first place. Depending on the size of your project, your editor will have more or less time in order to complete their assembly. For instance, a 1-hour television show, an editor gets about 4 or 5 full working days to put together their assembly of that episode. Let me add that it's 4 days after the episode is done shooting, because most commonly they are cutting scenes each day throughout the shooting of that episode. But if you are not editing while you're shooting, then maybe consider that and give them a bit more time. If your editor has some experience, they should be able to tell you a comfortable time frame for them to complete their assembly.
Now, it's interesting because you say, an editor's assembly. I always kind of also refer to that as just like my skeleton edit, and I was very much like what you said. I just plop the good things in just so I simply have something to look at and see from the beginning to the end. And honestly, like in my experience, these edits are always crap. Like they are so rough. It's literally just to have a workspace. And then for me, I would always go from an assembly to a rough cut. But it sounds like what you're saying is, an assembly and a rough cut could kind of be the same thing.
Sure, yeah. On a much larger production, you would have a lot more steps or a lot more cuts, for instance.
Well, tell us so like on a large scale production, you've got your editor's assembly. What would be the next cut after that?
Yeah, so after your editor's assembly is complete, within the time you give them, to just state that without a schedule, much like any other creative position, they will take as much time and never stop unless you force them to. So within their time frame, they will produce to you their editor's assembly. And the next step, naturally, would be the director's cut. So you invite the director. If it's not you, the director will have their opportunity to massage that assembly and get the cut to a place that they always envisioned, or what you would have discussed with your director. Now, if you are the writer, director, producer, and everything, you can kind of skip most of that stuff. But basically, it would be the editor, then the director would get their time, much less time than the editor's assembly, give them, a few days. Then next would be a producer's cut. So any producers that are involved, whether they be creative or monetary, they get their opportunity to massage the cut even further. And going beyond the producer's cut, if you have, let's say, a network or a studio or a potential distribution partner involved, that would be the last stage that they get an opportunity to provide you notes. I just might add that last step, by the time you make it there, you have got what your project is going to be, and it's their opportunity to give their expertise, if you will, on what they think could make your project just a little bit better before you lock the picture.
And I have found that on the smaller scale, you get that assembly, you get your rough cut. And I mean, I'm sure anybody here that's done some editing before, you'll see rough cut 1, rough cut 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it can seem endless. And again, this is where schedule really pays its dividends, because it forces you to focus and get it done in a reasonable amount of time and make decisions. And then in my experience, after however many rough cuts you had, I would have eventually just get to the picture lock and the director's cut. And that works for the short films. Now with the music videos, you'll usually go back and forth, because in this case, I guess you could say that the band or the artist would be, they would be the producer, right? So they're obviously going to get their say. So in that case, on the smaller productions and music videos, I would present the director's cut to the musicians. And then we'd go back and forth a bit there until we found something that we're both happy with. One key thing that I will, piece of advice that I will give you guys is, if you're doing directing for clients, whether it be like, a clothing thing or a coffee house or wedding videos. That's another key one here. As the editor or director, you definitely want to explain with your client that you only get so many re-edits because, opportunities for them to give input, because otherwise, I've been caught in this, especially with weddings. They will come back and make endless changes over and over and over and over, and you'll never finish the project, or so it'll seem. You'll end up doing a lot of extra work that you didn't plan for. So that's something else to include when you're like working with clients and creating deadlines. Let them know how many re-edits they get before they have to start paying extra. So for all you indie commercial and wedding videographers, editors, directors, keep that in mind as well.